side. Murphy shooting, save a rebound on the view.
Hey everyone, I'm Casey, and you're watching the Red Rubber Duckman All Sports Network. And the time has finally come to predict the 2023 2024 NFL playoffs. And it's going to be really, really interesting. This bracket looks extremely, extremely difficult to predict because you got some teams that look like dark horses. You have some wild card teams that can make some noise, and even the 7 seeds, the seeds that should not exist, have a chance to shock the world. And it's going to be an interesting super wild card round because, of course, you got history involved and some you got some injuries involved that might weaken some of the surprising chaos moments. But we're going to start off with the first game of the Super Wildcard weekend and then go through the rest of the bracket. And it's the Cleveland Browns traveling to Houston to take on the Texans. Now, the Browns, they're going to, at the time of this recording, Denzel Ward has been reported as questionable for the playoffs because he injured his knee during the practice today at the time of this recording, which is January 11th. And they're also dealing with Cedric Tillman being out with a concussion. Dustin Hopkins is out, their kicker. And then Grant Delpit, their safety, is out as well. And as for the Texans, the only person who's out right now is Jerry Hughes, their defensive end. Robert Woods is also questionable with a hip injury. And Noah Brown is also questionable, as well as Malik Collins, their defensive tackle. In their previous meeting, the Browns did go into Houston and whipped the ever-loving shit out of Houston. And do I see it happening? Of course I do, because this is not the Browns of old. The Browns have shown that despite all their injuries, Nick Chubb was gone, and Amari Cooper was also out for that contest. Now they have him back, and I really think that the Browns will continue domination. I think the Cleveland Browns move on. The next matchup is Miami going to Kansas City. It's going to be one of the coldest games in NFL history because the wind chill over there, I think they said, was a low of -9 degrees. So it's going to be an interesting game, to say the least, because Miami, they're not going to be at home. They blew the opportunity to host a playoff game to Buffalo in Week 18. So now they got to travel to Kansas City, and it's not going to be an easy trip because Miami has not beaten a team over 500 until they beat Dallas. And with Kansas City, they have had issues with receivers catching things all season long, especially with Kadarius Toney dropping a few. Justin Ross is questionable with a hamstring. And by the way, Toney's questionable with a hip and ankle injury. And Travis Kelce has been dealing with drops of his own. Patrick Mahomes has not been getting plenty of help, except from the Chiefs' defense, because that's their strong point. If the defense collapses, the Chiefs are basically done because Patrick Mahomes doesn't have Tyreek Hill. He's on the other side with the Miami Dolphins. And so it's going to be a revenge game for him. Do I think Miami has a chance to beat Kansas City? It's possible, but I just don't see it happening because Patrick Mahomes and company could wake up at any time. I think Kansas City does just enough to move on. Next up, you got the Sunday game. the Sunday afternoon game between Pittsburgh and Buffalo. So the Steelers, they needed some help. They beat the Ravens backups, and they needed Jacksonville to lose, which they did, to get in. And Pittsburgh is running into some injury trouble with TJ Watt being out with an ankle injury. But Minka Fitzpatrick is projected on coming back, as well as Casey, the one who did that terrible hit on back in Indy. Yeah, he's going to be coming back. As for the Bills, Gabe Davis did not participate in practice. Neither did Von Miller, nor Taylor Rapp, nor did Russell Douglas. But the Bills, they earned the right to earn this home playoff game. And if I remember correctly, the Bills are one of the hottest teams, as well as the Steelers, with Mason Rudolph taking the charge. Rudolph has 3 straight wins under his belt ever since he took over for Mitch Trubisky. As for the Bills got off to a pretty slow start to start things off, but they proceeded to win 5 straight games after their bye week, including a win over the Chiefs and the Cowboys as well. So the Bills do have a pretty strong case. And as for the Steelers, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Magic's going to run out. I did say between Buffalo and Kansas City, I think Buffalo, we have a better chance of beating, but I just don't see it happening. I see Buffalo moving on. And they did say with the lake effect snow in Buffalo coming up, they can move the game to Cleveland. But regardless of location, I still say the Bills. Next up, we got Green Bay and Dallas. It's a classic playoff rivalry. And I think the Cowboys have the upper hand on this one for one simple reason. Aaron Rodgers can't haunt him anymore. That being said, there is a possibility that Jordan Love can pull magic out and lead the Packers to a deep playoff run, even as the 7th seed. But the Cowboys' defense was something to admire. When they're not getting burned by good teams, they're absolutely thrashing their opponents. And as for the Packers, they needed some magic to get there. Green Bay, they won 6 of their last 8 games, and it turned out to be just enough to get that number 7 seed that should not exist. Do I think the Packers have a chance of beating Dallas? For sure. But the thing is, you're playing at Jerry World, and Dallas is undefeated at home. And I think it's going to continue. I think Dallas takes care of Green Bay. In the Sunday night game, you have Detroit versus LA, or the Rams. The Rams, they're bringing home one of Detroit's favorite sons, and Matthew Stafford. But you can't discount that Jared Goff wants some revenge on the Rams. Because keep in mind, these are the 2 teams involved in that trade that sent Matthew Stafford to LA. Since then, Matthew Stafford finally gets his ring. And as for Jared Goff, he then led Detroit to their first NFC division title in over 30 years. Is this going to happen? Do I think Detroit's going to hold on? I think so. But if you look at the injury report, of course, Brian Branch should be coming back. And Jordan Fuller, Rob Havenstein, Joe Noteboom, and Troy Reader did not participate in practice. But Tyler Higbee and Kevin Dotson, they should be all right and good to go for Sunday night. But Brian Branch is coming back for the Lions as well as, but Taylor Decker. However, Taylor Decker is not participating in practice as of late, and they might lose Sam Laporta. But Jamison Williams is there to should be coming back as well as Brock Wright, their backup tight end. I do see this game going either way, but I think Detroit will do just enough. And then the Monday night game, which I think should not exist, Tampa Bay versus Philadelphia. These two teams have just been absolutely terrible. They like Tampa Bay, they won the NFC South by default, and Philadelphia is in the middle of a huge, huge collapse. As for Tampa Bay, they did win 5 of their last 6. So if you look at the hotter teams, the Buccaneers are definitely on that list. Because keep in mind, the Eagles started out 10-1, and then they proceeded to lose 5 of their last 6. So this team is in the middle of a 2020 Steelers type season. So do I see it hurting the Eagles? Absolutely. Forget the injury reports. I'm going to say Tampa Bay is going to move on. So we now go to the divisional round, and I have Baltimore and Cleveland going up against each other. There's not much needs to be said. Baltimore is the number 1 seed. You saw what happened against Baltimore and Miami in a supposed battle for the number 1 seed in the AFC. They've shown resilience. They did get off to a slow start, including losing to the Steelers twice this year. Not to rub it in. But the Ravens have been one of the strongest teams this year. And I think it continues with Lamar Jackson, including with Zay Flowers at the helm of receiving, and as well as Isaiah Likely replacing an injured Mark Andrews. I think Baltimore does get to Cleveland, even though these two have had really entertaining matchups this year, especially in Baltimore, but not necessarily in Cleveland. But coming up, we got Buffalo and Kansas City. Oh boy. The playoff battle then never ends. And this time, it's going to be in Buffalo or Cleveland if they so desire. However, do I see Josh Allen finally getting revenge for playoff failures? Of course, because you saw it in the regular season. He is completely owned the Chiefs. As for the Chiefs, they completely own Josh Allen in the playoffs. But I think this time it's going to be the other way around. I think Buffalo moves on to Baltimore. Next up, we got San Francisco going up against Tampa Bay. Now, San Francisco was resting their starters with Brock Purdy, of course, and they've shown how dangerous they could be with George Kittle. You even had Debo Samuel and Elijah Mitchell, and as well as their defense with Nick Bosa at the helm. I've seen what this team could do, and I think San Francisco will take care of Tampa Bay in Levi Stadium. Next up, we got Dallas versus Detroit. So Dallas, as I mentioned before, is undefeated at Jerry World. And then Detroit as well. They're looking for revenge against Dallas. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't think so. Because I know Dallas likes to collapse in this particular round, but right now, I think it would take a miracle for them to progressively collapse in the divisional round. It's a matter of how and when. It's a matter of how it's going to happen. But I'd say Dallas does move on over Detroit because it just looks too risky to pick Detroit here. So we got the AFC Championship game between Baltimore and Buffalo. I know I picked Buffalo to be in the Super Bowl last year. We know how that turned out. And I went against the number one seeds last year, and look what happened. We had both number one seeds go down to Glendale. And I'm going to pick Baltimore to move on because there's just so much talent on that roster. And I think Baltimore has the greater edge over Buffalo. And I think Baltimore will be going to the Super Bowl. Next up, we got San Francisco versus Dallas. Classic playoff rivalry again. And this time, Dallas has to go to Levi's Stadium. And we all know what happened the last time that these two teams met there. And I think San Francisco is going to take care of Dallas, and they will go to the Super Bowl. So that means my Super Bowl 58 matchup is Baltimore and San Francisco. Now, could we see a different matchup? Absolutely, we could. But at this point, I gotta choose between two of the best teams this year. Baltimore took care of business at Levi's Stadium, but can they do it again can they do it again at Allegiant Stadium? And does San Francisco get revenge? I think the answer is no. I pick, as much as it pains me as a Steelers fan to say it, I'm going with the Baltimore Ravens because right now the team is just too talented. And I think the winner of Baltimore and Cleveland has a very good chance of making it to the Super Bowl if that matchup were to happen. So that's going to do it for my NFL playoff predictions. I'm going to now reveal the charity that I chose for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Buffalo Bills wild card matchup. And the nonprofit I chose for Buffalo is Rooted in Love. So Rooted in Love is formed for the purpose of aiding the homeless and the less fortunate in disadvantaged communities within the Western New York area who are in need of fresh produce, non-perishable foods, and hygiene products. I'll leave the link to Rooted in Love in the description. Check that out. But that's going to do it for me. In case you've been watching River of Dublin on Sports Network, and we'll meet again.